Like all pro players, Takuma Sakamoto has a great talent for video games, but has a completely nerfed socialization statistic, which is why he humiliates every partner he encounters in the game. Although in real life Sakamoto is an otaku who spends his time locked in his room, he is literally the most feared player of Cross Reverie, the most famous and played MMORPG in the world. In fact, his in-game nickname is Diablo, and he is considered the Demon King of the game, as he is literally stronger than the final bosses. One day, two waifus summon him into the Cross Reverie universe. Fortunately for him, he is summoned with the appearance and stats he possesses within the game, and although they summon him using a slavery spell, he is able to reflect all spells and control effects they try to use on him. For this reason, the waifus are enslaved by Diablo, so his plan went completely backwards, and now they must obey him. The waifus finally introduce themselves and reveal their names, Shara and Rem. They both want to register in the Adventurers Guild, so Diablo accompanies them. Upon arrival, the waifus ask for only one room at the inn to save money, which means Diablo will have to spend the whole night disguising his lack of tact with women. At that moment, Celestine Baudelaire, the leader of the wizards, who is so important that she keeps the city's barrier activated, appears. Celestine immediately notices the situation, so she asks Diablo to release the waifus from the enslavement spell. Diablo explains to her that he did not carry out the spell voluntarily, so he cannot undo it. For this reason, Celestine offers Rem 24/7 protection and surveillance, but the waifu refuses and Celestine leaves the place. This provokes curiosity in Diablo, who suspects that Rem must be someone very interesting for someone important like Celestine to be aware of the situation. Diablo takes Rem to force information out of her, and although the waifu was expecting a real torture, Diablo just tickles her ears. After this, Diablo vows not to leave the waifu under any circumstances, whereupon Rem reveals that the soul of the demon lady Krebskulm is sealed inside her. Krebskulm is the most powerful boss in the game, and everyone longs to defeat him, but Rem confesses that only Celestine knew the information she just revealed. However, Diablo immediately understands that Krebskulm will be released the day Rem loses her life, so it is vital to protect her until a way can be found to break the seal. All this moves Diablo, so he commits himself to help the waifu find a solution. Obviously, the waifu gives such a kawaii smile that Diablo takes a moment to be alone and reflect. Later on, outside of the kingdom, Celestine's guards approach him to annoy him, as one of them got angry at Diablo for being rude. In fact, the guard summons an incredible level 30 creature-like dragon, but Diablo proves that he is on another level and literally destroys it effortlessly. The next day, the group tours the city looking for the Adventurers Guild. Rem explains that at the guild, they will be able to register as adventurers and find out their exact level. Upon arrival, Shara and Diablo sign their registration form and use a magic mirror to find out their level. The mirror reveals that Shara is level 30, but when Diablo tries to do the same, the whole place is corrupted, and the guildmaster appears to talk to Diablo. The waifu reveals that the mirror is unable to measure Diablo's level because its power is too great. Moreover, she acknowledges that even she is below Diablo's level. However, Diablo agrees to join the guild as long as she is paid for each mission performed, news that makes the waifu very happy. After this, the group receives the mission to get the eyes of a giant swamp snake, as the Mage Guild needs such items. After walking for hours and hours, the group arrives at the Man-Eater Forest at nightfall. However, they begin to sense that they are not alone in the place, and their suspicions are confirmed a moment later, when Diablo sets the forest on fire with a spell. The ambushers were none other than a group of elves from the Royal Guard, who were trying to rescue the princess. Diablo immediately remembers that Shara's last name is Greenwood, and after making use of her memory, he remembers that this family is literally the one that governs the elves. However, the waifu refuses to leave with the elves, as her father wants to force her into a political marriage. The elves try to take the princess by force, so they must defeat Diablo in the process. Obviously, they are unaware that he is the protagonist of the anime. Diablo beats them up just by using a spell, and only moments later, discovers that Celestine's guard had planned the whole thing all along, entrusting the guild with the mission. Rem scolds the guard, as he used the Mage Guild signature for his own interests. The guard leaves, and Shara again reaffirms her decision in front of the elves, so they have no choice but to leave the place empty-handed. Days later, Sylvie summons the group to give them a new mission. This time, the mission is entrusted by Celestine herself, so everyone agrees without problems, except for Rem, who doesn't want to owe anything to the leader of the mages. As they leave the place, Diablo is challenged to a duel by Emile, the supposedly strongest adventurer of the whole guild. The idea of measuring himself against someone interesting raises Diablo's hype to the highest, but his expectations vanish seconds later, as Emile is nothing more than a simp, who, despite being strong by the world's standards, is still not a worthy opponent for Diablo. The Waifus explain the situation to Emile, and he happily retreats, proving that, although he is a simp, he is a good person. Diablo and Shera arrive at the castle to deliver the mission they were given, but the knights give Diablo a rude reception. To clear things up, Diablo introduces himself, and the knights apologize, arguing that the city is being threatened by the Fallen, a group of horned monsters. Although Diablo has already fulfilled his assignment, he cannot stand by and watch the knights trembling in fear, so he pledges to help them during the invasion. The knights protect themselves by entering the city and closing the walls, leaving Diablo to handle the situation. Meanwhile, Celestine meets with Rem to confess to her that she expelled her guard from the Mage Association. She also interrogates Rem to find out if Diablo is trustworthy. However, the guard appears at that moment and, completely freaked out, begs to be let back into the Mage Association. After this, he uses a magic sword that, after being used on himself, summons a fallen man. At the same time, Diablo meets Edelgard, the most powerful lancer of the Fallen. Although the citizens feel safe inside the city, they do not know that one of the Fallen is literally already among them. Rem and Celes escape from the place while a group of guards try to stop the beast. However, the beast quickly catches up with the Waifus. Fortunately, Emile appears at that precise moment and, being a brave simp, promises to give his life for the Waifus. Meanwhile, Diablo fights with Edelgard in an unbelievable fight for all the spectators. However, Diablo is even struggling, so the waifu decides to use her most powerful and devastating attack. For the first time, Diablo is excited to receive an attack, as despite being on a very different level, the waifu was the most powerful opponent he had faced so far. Although Diablo wanted to entertain himself for a while longer, Shera explains to him the whole situation inside the city, so the Demon King decides to make a devastating attack to prove to Edelgard that Krebskulm is just an imitation and that he is the real Demon King. Edelgard is the only survivor of the attack and stares in amazement as Diablo is able to teleport using magic. Inside the city, Emile is about to lose his life while protecting the Waifus, but Diablo arrives just in time to take charge of the situation. The monster has no idea what is about to happen to him, so he uses his last minutes to behave arrogantly. Diablo humiliates the beast again and again until he decides to seal the monster in a dimension of absolute darkness. 3 days later, the victims of the assault were buried in a sentimental farewell ceremony. This affects Diablo emotionally, who can't help but think that these people really lost their lives and won't respawn as they did in the Cross Revier he played. After this, Sylvie appears to reveal that Shera's father will start a war if Shera does not return to the palace in the next 10 days. Sylvie asks Diablo to stop the war, but he refuses, as doing such a thing would take away his reputation as the Demon King. However, he immediately agrees upon hearing that Shera's brother put a bounty on her, as he takes it personally. For this reason, the whole group goes to see the Lord of Faltra, since he is the one who rules the city. In fact, Lord Feltra had been the hero of the city 30 years ago, as he was able to defeat an army of Fallen with his own hands. This excites Diablo, as he is likely to find a worthy opponent. Upon arrival, the group finally meets Galford, who was waiting for them to discuss the conflict. Diablo tries to present himself in the best light, not appearing weak, but keeping in mind his reputation as a Demon King. Obviously, as expected, he achieves neither, and makes a fool of himself. Galford explains the political situation with the elves with intentions of persuading Shera. However, the latter again ratifies her decision to live as an adventurer, so Diablo refuses to hand over the princess and gives an epic speech about freedom. Galford has no choice but to accept the waifu's decision, but holds Diablo responsible for avoiding war. He also introduces Alicia Cristela, an imperial knight sent to negotiate with the elves and accompany Diablo. The waifu introduces herself kindly and shows much cordiality towards her new companions, which catches Diablo's attention, as he cannot believe that a person is able to socialize so well. After this, the group goes to the city center to make a brief stop at the gunsmith, as Diablo needs weapons that are not so lethal if he does not want to worsen the political situation with the elves. However, shortly after getting the weapon, the group is surprisingly attacked by a group of elves, and Shera is kidnapped. Diablo immediately runs after the waifu and with Emil's help, manages to rescue her. After this, Emil takes the fugitives away and reminds Shera to be careful, as the adventurers are trying to collect the bounty on her. The next day, Celestine invites the group to the tavern to tell them that there will be a slave liberation ceremony, which excites everyone, as they can probably find a solution for the waifus. Diablo decides that, although the elf issue is urgent, they should take at least a day to solve the necklace issue. Arriving at the slave market, the group meets Meteos, the owner of the place. She is able to see people's magical energy, which scares everyone slightly. It is also revealed that, although she never confessed it, Shera has inherited that ability from her elven family. The waifu reveals that it is likely that she can remove necklaces from waifus, but does not guarantee it 100%, as she had never heard of a similar case. She also puts Rem and Diablo in an awkward situation, as she mentions that Rem is surrounded by demonic energy. While waiting for Medea to perform the ritual, Rem and Alicia talk about the secrets they each keep. To calm Rem down, Alicia plays a child's game of closing Rem's manon like a chest to keep her secrets. However, she is frightened to see Rem emanating black magic. In the evening, Diablo confesses that he was unable to perform the ritual because of how uncomfortable it was for both him and Shera. As the other waifus fail to fully understand what the ritual consisted of, they decide to leave it at that and prepare to sleep. However, Shera's brother bursts into the room in the middle of the night and Diablo is put on alert. Anyway, the boy presents himself peacefully and promises that he will fully respect Shera's decision, to the point of swearing that the war was just a misunderstanding. Kira leaves and asks her sister to reflect on her final decision. During the night, Rem discovers that Shera cannot sleep, so she gets up to comfort the waifu. Shera tells him that she doesn't hesitate one bit about her decision, as she is happy living together with them and considers them to be her new family. During the night, Diablo has a flashback in his dreams, in which he remembers how the kids at his school took advantage of his talent for video games. However, those same kids made fun of him behind his back. In the morning, Alicia and Rem leave the place to notify their superiors about what happened to Shera's brother. After this, Diablo spends the day teaching Shera alchemy, as it is necessary for her to learn how to brew potions. However, suddenly, the waifu says goodbye to Diablo and tells him the Diablo she has changed her mind. Diablo is perplexed, as he does not understand what is happening. Shera gets into her brother's carriage and returns to the Elf Kingdom. Alice and Rem arrive at that moment, but can do nothing but watch as Diablo locks himself in his room. As Diablo does not improve after a few days, Rem decides to enter his room to comfort him, and confess that he believes Shera did not make her decision voluntarily, as the waifus had spoken the night before. Diablo reveals that he has not stopped thinking the same thing, as Kira seemed to manipulate Shera by playing the flute. They both get enough motivation to march to the elves' palace and decide to face the challenge. Obviously, Alicia joins them even though she might lose her position. Meanwhile, Kira holds Shera hostage, revealing that her flute is capable of hypnotizing her. He also confesses that he plans to have a child with Shera, giving us the most disturbing moment of the anime. Fortunately, Diablo arrives just in time, before Kira can carry out her plan. The Elven Prince runs to the camp to seek help from his guards, but realizes that Diablo left the place in ruins. Kira tries to use elven magic to manipulate Shera, but Diablo uses the necklace to break the spell. Out of resources, Kira has no choice but to summon the most powerful beast the elves possess. Obviously, Diablo decides to fight despite the waifus' warnings. Diablo begins the battle by summoning a shower of rocks on the beast, causing a great deal of damage. However, the beast regenerates at an incredible speed, perplexing Diablo. Furthermore, seeing that the monster is able to attack using all the elements, Diablo realizes that he has never seen anything like it before in the game. Fortunately, Shera reveals that he can win the battle if he can destroy the beast's core, which is constantly moving throughout its body. Diablo literally overloads the beast's entire body with magic, winning the fight in a single move. Kira was about to receive the same punishment, but Shera intercedes for him, asking Diablo to let him live. However, Just as the elf was about to escape, Galford appears and finishes him off, revealing that the war was part of his plan. Diablo quickly understands that Galford only wanted to conquer Greenwood, and before he can do anything, Galford locks him in a magical barrier. However, Diablo uses all his concentration to find the barrier's flow of magic and escapes before Galford takes his Waifus. The fight between the two begins, and Diablo finally faces a more than worthy opponent, as Galford moves at inhuman speed and understands perfectly how to fight a sorcerer. However, Diablo is extremely intelligent and has spent hundreds of hours of his life learning how to defeat fighters like Galford, so he manages to defeat him through strategy. Galford acknowledges his defeat, and although he was expecting the coup de grace, Diablo humiliates him by saying that he will not dirty his hands with someone so weak. He also warns him to stay away from his Waifus. Galford leaves and Rem begins to assist the fallen elves in battle, while Shera mourns the loss of her brother. Days later, while reporting back to the castle what happened, Alicia encounters Sadler, a persuasive and sadistic elite soldier. The relationship between the two is strained, as Sadler wishes to eliminate everything related to demons, and Alicia spends her days fighting alongside Diablo. In addition, Sadler reveals that he must travel to Falta in the next few days, which puts Alicia on alert. Meanwhile, the rest of the group spends the afternoon training new summons until, after a long while, they decide to go to the hot springs. However, Edelgard suddenly appears and puts Diablo on alert. The waifu confesses that she has no intention of fighting and that she is only there to fulfill a mission she was given. After this, she reveals that her mission was only to find out if Rem really possessed Krebskulm sealed inside her, as her goal is to bring the demon lady back to life. To convince Diablo, Edelgard confesses that the ritual will not harm Rem's body at all, plus the waifu will be worshipped by the fallen. Diablo agrees, but on the condition that Edelgard leaves the ritual in his hands, as he plans to defeat Krebskulm after releasing her. The next day, Alice tells the group that they must act stealthily to keep a low profile, as Sadler prowls the city for clues. Although Diablo wants to see what the paladin is capable of, he decides to trust Alicia. However, they meet him almost immediately, and things become tense. Rem begins to defend Alicia from Sadler's accusations, but Sadler begins to smother her with magic, which infuriates Diablo. Sadler tries to use a spell to petrify Diablo, but Diablo simply uses his ring to reflect the spell and end the fight in an instant. At the end of the day, the waifus decide that they must tell Alice the truth, and although Diablo believes that Alice will not agree to perform the ritual, the waifu agrees and gives us the most tender moment of the anime. In the evening, the group arrives at the ritual site and meet Edelgard, who is not bothered by Alicia's presence. Later, Rem confesses that, although he distrusts the fallen, he trusts Diablo completely. In the most disturbing way, Diablo performs the ritual and manages to release the seal without harming Rem. The fearsome demon lady comes back to life, and everyone is perplexed to see that she is nothing more than an innocent loli. In fact, as she does not remember why she tortured humans, she lets Rem convince her and decides not to do any more atrocities. To satiate the loli's voracious appetite, Shera gives her some cookies. After this, the whole group heads to the city, as the loli became obsessed with trying new flavors of cookies. On the way they meet Eulorex, the chief servant that the demon lords have had for generations. Edelgard reveals that Eulorex is much stronger than elite soldiers, the Fallen, and it is confirmed almost immediately, as the loli refuses to sacrifice the humans accompanying her, leading Eulorex to believe that Edelgard was wrong about the ritual. Eulorex attacks Edelgard relentlessly, but Diablo intervenes and puts the demon in its place. However, he tries to kill the loli to do the ritual correctly, but Rem saves her. Eulorex flees and the group decides to enter the city once and for all. Obviously, Edelgard cannot enter without being discovered, so she says goodbye to the loli, who is baptized by the group as Clem. The next day, the group tours the city as usual, but Alicia acts strangely. Even later, when everyone relaxes in the cafeteria, Alice continues to behave the same way, and unbeknownst to Diablo, Alice quietly takes Rem and Clem away. Diablo has a bad feeling and starts looking for the waifus everywhere. However, his hunch is correct, as Alicia worked tirelessly from the shadows to resurrect Clem, and that the loli isn't able to remember who she is, upset him greatly. Rem can't believe that Alicia faked it for all that time, but before she could say anything, she realizes that Sadler has already arrived on the scene for revenge. The waifus are captured by the paladins, and Clem takes the moment to apologize to Rem, as he has learned all that Rem had to endure for having the demon lady inside him. Anyway, Rem also empathizes with the loli, who didn't choose to be the demon mistress or anything. Also, Rem makes the loli promise not to hurt anyone. After a while, the paladins take Rem to a dark place and tell her that they will torture her as much as necessary until the waifu confesses everything she knows. But she doesn't even pay attention to them, and just tries to understand why Alice betrayed everyone. Meanwhile, Diablo despairs as he sees that night has fallen, but remembers that there is always someone who appears at just the right moments: Emile. Diablo arrives at the Adventurers Guild and finds them celebrating a banquet, but before asking for help, he hears that the paladins kidnapped two waifus to take them to their headquarters, so he runs at full speed to save them. Meanwhile, Galford realizes that the Fallen are about to invade Falta. On the other hand, Sadler tortures Rem as he had said, but the waifu only asks Clem not to break his promise. However, Clem explodes in fury when she sees Sadler render Rem practically lifeless, so all her power is released and she becomes the fearsome demon lady. Sadler is wiped off the face of the earth in a single blow, and Clem escapes from the scene. Diablo arrives at that moment and asks Shera to heal Rem, so he gives her a large amount of medicine. Meanwhile, Alice meets with Edelgard, revealing that he orchestrated everything to wipe out the humans once and for all. She literally made Clem and Rem become friends only to unleash the loli's inner evil, unleashing chaos throughout the city. Celestine does her best efforts to keep the city's barrier active, while Sylvie asks Galford to only take care of the fallen army, as Diablo will be able to deal with the demon lady. However, the waifu doesn't know that Diablo literally used all her potions to save Rem, who had been seriously injured. Rem explains Alice's plan to Shera and is terrified to learn that Diablo is fighting the demon lady without potions. Fortunately, Emile arrives on the scene just in time and makes things easier for Diablo, who manages to neutralize the demon lady. Also, Rem starts to call Clem, making the loli take control of her body again and completely stopping the invasion of the Fallen, as it became clear that they are not capable of attacking the city without the demon lady's power. When things calm down, Sylvie confesses that the situation made it clear that Clem cannot live inside the city. Because of this, Diablo has the brilliant idea to use the bondage ritual so that the loli can live free inside the city. So he performs the spell he learned days before to place the collar on Clem. Obviously, Sylvie notifies Galford of this, who agrees. When everything seemed to be back to normal, Alice appears in the middle of the night threatening to take Shera's life. However, she begins to ask Clem to please heal Edelgard, who was attacked by the Fallen due to the mission failure. The loli agrees once Diablo allows her, so Edelgard's wounds heal and she vows not to attack humans anymore, as she does not want to go against the will of the person she has worshipped since birth. However, Alice cannot wipe the slate clean, as she feels she has crossed a boundary. The waifu reveals that she grew up watching her entire family secretly commit atrocities while pretending to be honorable people, which led her to doubt and distrust everyone to the point of wishing for the extermination of all humans. Diablo manages to stop Alice before she commits something crazy, and also restores her will to live by giving her one of the best speeches in the anime. This weakens Diablo, but his waifus help him recover his energy points in a questionable way. The next day, Alicia emotionally says goodbye to the group to rebuild her life. Weeks later, two waifus named Lumachina and Tria escape through the forest until a giant beast traps Tria. Then, a tyrant named Gewalt appears and strikes fear into Lumachina, who literally begins to pray for her life. As if in divine response, Diablo appears and leaves the waifu with her mouth wide open. The story goes back to what had happened minutes before to put use in context. Diablo was trying to teach his waifus a spell so that they could flee, but his spell was weakened by Gewalt, and Diablo accidentally fell into the forest. Gewalt can't believe that one of his summons was destroyed in front of his eyes, but Diablo doesn't even pay attention to it, as he concentrates on helping Lumachina, who doesn't stop believing that Diablo is the god she prayed to for so long. Gewalt begins to attack violently, and proves that he is not just another adventurer, as he possesses great knowledge in elemental magic and summoning. Obviously, as we have seen throughout the anime, Gewalt underestimates Diablo, and ends up completely frozen due to the enormous power of the game admin. Rem and Shera arrive at that moment and help the waifu, while Gewalt watches everything furiously. At night, Lumachina confesses that she believes Diablo is God, But when the waifus explain the truth, Lumachina decides that she must marry Diablo, since she promised that she would marry the man who first saw her. This drives the waifus crazy, so Diablo decides to enter the place to bring order, and finds that Lumachina is none other than the high priestess of the church, which means that she is literally the most important person in the entire church. However, she confesses that she has blown the whistle on the corruption of the higher-ups, which is why everyone is trying to eliminate her. She also reveals that her plan is to meet with Batuta, the noble and trusted leader of the Paladins, so the group decides to escort her. Obviously, Edelgard and Clem immediately notice Luchaman's magic, so Diablo decides not to take them on the trip to avoid conflicts between them. For this, he asks several people in the kingdom for help, as he does not want to leave his waifus unprotected. Also, Clem upgrades Shera's bow to make it more powerful. After a long journey, the group finally arrives at their destination and discovers that the city is submerged in mediocrity. Diablo meets a boy, and the boy confirms his suspicions. The dungeon Diablo used to frequent is in that place. A corrupt guard appears, and Lumachina berates him, so Diablo must save her. After this, one of the local women exposes the corruption of the place, revealing that her baby has become seriously ill, and the only ones who can save him are the priests of the church, who ask her for a financial contribution in exchange for performing the miracle. This outrages Lumachina, who decides to heal the child on her own. Lumachina begins to pray along with everyone in the place, and the child is healed after a great burst of light descends from the sky. After this, a guard alerts the entire population, as a beast is invading the city. Obviously, everyone turns to Diablo, who has no choice but to take charge of the situation. However, when Diablo starts to carry out his spell, another person smoothly finishes off the beast. A man appears on the scene and Diablo becomes alert, as he senses its great power immediately. Anyway, one of the guards warns that the man is none other than Batuta, which further increases the tension as the waifu confronts the chief paladin due to the corruption of his men. Batuta beats one of his soldiers and apologizes on his knees to Lumachina for the irreverence of his men, so the group decides to momentarily trust him. However, a waifu named Fanis appears and further increases the tension, as she quickly demonstrates her repudiation of the church, accusing them of being swindlers. Upon seeing the high priestess, Fanis decides to test the church's faith, so she prepares to attack Lumachina. Obviously, Diablo and Batuta prevent it, and Fanis decides to flee, but not before confessing that he wants to meet the person who was able to cast the spell that immobilized the beast. After this, Batuta escorts the group to his mansion to apologize to Lumachina. However, the waifu is even more upset to see that Batuta does absolutely nothing to fight poverty. In fact, Lumachina summons Baluta to ask for explanations. The leader of the Paladins confesses that he founded the brigade of soldiers solely to protect the priests from the threats stalking the city. He also admits that his lack of attention led to corruption among the troops, so he promises to take action to put an end to the situation. However, Lumachina puts Batuta in check by confessing that she no longer believes a word he says. The waifu reveals that the supposed disease plaguing the city is nothing more than a curse, which puts Batuta between a rock and a hard place. In any case, the waifus faint because Batuta had used sleeping pills on them. Diablo arrives at the scene minutes later and discovers what happened, so he rushes to find his waifus, who are literally at the mercy of Batuta's evil. Lumachina does not understand what is going on, so Batuta reveals that the essence of evil is produced in that place by making the most devout men and women fall into temptation. He further reveals that the curse that plagues the city is produced by the essence produced in that place, and intends to use Lumachina to overthrow Fanis, as the evil essence is even purer if it is produced with holy people. Diablo arrives at the location and quickly rebukes Batuta, but immediately realizes that it will be a difficult scenario to fight, as any attack can collapse the place and cause the loss of Lumachina and Rem. Diablo takes the "Why Men Live Less" meme and decides that the best way to defeat Batuta is to let Batuta spear him, solely so he can use one of his ice spells. Batuta has no choice but to lose one of his arms to escape the spell, and although he thinks the fight is over in his favor, he discovers that Diablo possesses a magical cloak capable of tanking deadly attacks. Because of this, Batuta's henchwoman threatens Diablo to torture Rem, but Shera smoothly takes care of her thanks to her enchanted bow. Batuta has no choice but to attack Diablo, so that Diablo destroys the whole place trying to defend himself. However, Diablo uses the spell he learned the day before and rescues his waifus. Unfortunately, he discovers that Lumachina contracted the curse, so he must search for the magic amulet that is in the dungeon, as Lumachina cannot heal herself. Shortly after starting their journey, the group encounters Phanes, who wishes to confront the famous Demon King who has arrived in the city. As he has 1 IQ, Diablo cannot hide who he is, so battle is imminent. Fortunately, Lumachina realizes that Diablo is a lousy diplomat, so she interferes to convince Phanes that Diablo is doing his best to help the people of the city. However, the waifu ignores this and starts the attack, so Diablo uses one of his spells to escape from the place. The funny thing is that during the night, Diablo keeps thinking that Phanes let them escape on purpose. In fact, this is confirmed the next day, when Gvalt visits Phanes' palace. The paladin tries to convince the waifu that Lumachina was kidnapped by Diablo, but she doesn't believe a word he says. However, one of her guards enters at that moment and reveals that Diablo's whereabouts were located. Meanwhile, the group arrives at the dungeon and Diablo feels confident, as he created the dungeon himself and knows each of the traps perfectly. Horn, the adventurer who has been helping them since they arrived in the city, tries to use a map to get through the labyrinth, but Diablo explains that the dungeon is constantly changing. The waifus don't know why Diablo knows the dungeon so well, but he makes them feel safe by passing each of the complicated tests perfectly. To reach their goal, the group literally goes through difficulties of all kinds, from a puzzle game to an idol contest. However, after overcoming dozens of trials, Diablo sees 2 summons that do not belong in the dungeon and begins to become alert. Gvalt suddenly appears and sows chaos by threatening Lumachina, but Horn risks his life to save her. Diablo doesn't hesitate for a second and jumps into the water stream to save Horn, leaving the other waifus alone. Diablo uses magic to reach Horn and take her to safety. Meanwhile, the waifus organize themselves to follow the path, as they know that Diablo and Horn are safe. However, upon reaching the 12th floor, the waifus encounter Gvalt, who begins to attack mercilessly, and although they try to defend themselves, they are no match for him. Suddenly, the final boss of the 12th floor appears and sows chaos in everyone, as he is far above any other beast. In fact, Gvalt takes up a large amount of mana to use Ifrit, Gvalt's most powerful fire summon and secret weapon, but the dragon destroys it in just 1 attack. Gvalt receives a mortal wound, but Lumachina mercifully steps in and heals the paladin. Diablo arrives just in time and, proving that he is the true admin of the game, knocks the dragon out. However, the final blow is delivered by Rose, a waifu that Diablo had chosen to protect the 13th floor. She recognizes Diablo immediately and begins to cry, so now she is also part of the group. After this, everyone enters the dungeon and sees the enormous amount of wealth that Diablo stored. In addition, the waifus confess that they know that Diablo was the creator of the dungeon, as he knew it too well. Rose leads the group to the amulet, and Lumachina is freed from the curse once and for all. After this, Diablo gives magic items to all his waifus to improve their stats, and they prepare for combat against the Fallen, as it is revealed that a fallen prince had threatened Phanes with destroying the city unless she agrees to marry him. The battle is disastrous for Phanes and his soldiers, as the Fallen are vastly superior in every aspect. However, Phanes manages to connect a deadly attack on Veracnus, the fallen prince, but immediately discovers that the women accompanying him are extremely strong. One of them heals the prince, while the other 2 carry out a massacre. Fortunately for Phanes, Diablo arrives at exactly the right time, and proves that he is the true Demon King, effortlessly destroying all the fallen. In addition, his waifus do a great job helping the wounded soldiers and taking care of the prince's beasts. Phanes explains to Diablo that if he can defeat the women, he can defeat Veracnus with no problem. So Diablo takes some regeneration potions and goes on the attack. He literally wipes out the waifus without any effort, provoking Veracnus's hatred in a second. The commander of the Fallen tries to retaliate with all his might, but Diablo is at an unimaginable level and humiliates Veracnus with no trouble. The next day, Phanes organizes a ceremony to honor the city's heroes, but Diablo quickly realizes that Horn mysteriously retired and decides to go looking for her. When he finally finds her, he realizes that she was being stalked by the group of criminals who used Horn as a servant, since she has been living on the streets. Diablo beats up the bullies and asks Horn to never run away again. Days later, the group returns to Faltra despite Lumachina literally being under threat. Lumachina wishes to visit the church members to help them with their problems, so Rem and Shara promise to escort her to reassure Diablo. In addition, Emil shows up and also offers his help. Meanwhile, Diablo and Rose go to look for Edelgard, who must work in a cafeteria to satiate Clem's desire for cookies 24/7. Diablo explains to Clem that he wants to go to the royal capital to put an end to corruption, but the lowly warns him that an evil presence awaits him. Suddenly, a group of stalkers enter the coffee shop to demand money, as they supposedly control the area, and the coffee shop opened without their business. The riot of the bullies causes Clem's cookie to be destroyed, so she freaks out and beats them up. At that moment, it is revealed that these bullies belong to the Miasmos family, a group of extortionists. Diablo goes to the mansion of the head of the family to put the matter in order, and although he uses every one of his soldiers to avoid the Demon King, Diablo and his waifus manage to infiltrate the mansion without any problems. Seeing that his life is in danger, the man begs for his life, and Diablo tells him that he will be forgiven if from now on he dedicates his life to mending all the evil he did to the city. At night, Galford scolds the group for Clem's lack of discretion, but seeing that literally the whole city is grateful and happy to no longer put up with criminals, Galford decides to turn a blind eye, and the group is given the green light to travel to the royal capital. After traveling for days, the group arrives in the royal city, but are poorly received by a group of knights. As usual, Diablo has no choice but to prepare for a fight, but is in for a big surprise when Alice shows up to ease the tension and allow them passage. Also, the waifu takes them to the palace and tells them that they should not spend a single penny, as she is still indebted to them. In fact, the waifu honors the presence of her guests with an incredible feast. During dinner, Horn considers performing the ritual to join Diablo's servitude, but reveals that he needs more time to think, as it is an irreversible decision. While everyone was asleep, Alice enters Diablo's room to try to convince him of the evil of humans, as she knows the plans the church has with Lumachina. However, Diablo does not wish to end the lives of the corrupt ones. He just wants to give them what they deserve. The next day, Alicia presents the evidence needed to imprison the church's top brass, as she bribed the church's treasurers to obtain invaluable information. She also reveals that Lumachina was not the only person the church persecuted, so Alice keeps trying to convince Diablo to take action, since justice will do nothing even with all that evidence. However, Lumachina asks for one last chance to dialogue with Vicious and use all the evidence to force him out of office. The group travels discreetly to meet with Vicious and, upon arrival, are greeted by a friendly group of believers. Vicious suddenly appears to greet Lumachina, but Lumachina immediately exhorts him, confessing to every single thing Vicious has done. The cardinal manipulates the situation and accuses Lumachina of practicing heresy, so he orders his capture. Diablo begins to plan his next attack, but the waifu decides to give herself up so as not to stain the cathedral with blood. Meanwhile, Horn discovers that one of the treasures she brought from Diablo's dungeon is protected by a little fairy named Babylon, who tells the lowly that she will help her become stronger. Babylon senses the presence of a magical object of great power, so Horn remembers the bondage necklace and uses it to greatly increase her powers thanks to Babylon's spell. Horn arrives at the cathedral and immediately discovers that his powers allow him to literally enchant all the guards in the place, so he manages to make his way through the cathedral without problems while obtaining valuable information about the whereabouts of his companions. Upon reaching the dungeon, she is severely damaged when ambushed by a summoner, so Diablo immediately destroys to help the lowly. Seeing that Horn is humiliated by the summoner, Diablo lifts her spirits by telling her that he wouldn't have opened his eyes if it weren't for her boldness. After this, he literally beats up the summoner and makes it clear once again why he is known as the Demon King. In addition, he uses a spell to project his image into the heavens and pretend that he is about to judge all believers for believing Vicious' lies. This whole scene is designed to let herself be defeated by Lumachina so that she is once again considered a heroine among the believers. However, Vicious seizes this moment and releases Europa, his secret weapon. Diablo knows that Europa is a beast with powers comparable to those of the Demon Queen, and that he cannot underestimate what such a beast is capable of in the hands of a deranged man like Vicious, so he takes the fight extremely seriously. Vicious knows that Diablo would give his life to save his friends, so he ruthlessly attacks Lumachina to set a trap. Fortunately, Diablo only receives a few wounds, but manages to save Lumachina and begins to think of a plan to fight back. Meanwhile, the believers realize that Vicios is the real villain and begin to pray to strengthen Lumachina. Rose protects Diablo from a lethal attack and gets seriously injured, so Diablo has no choice but to stall for time until Lumachina is ready. Vicios attacks with all her strength to stop Lumachina, but Diablo protects her until she exhausts almost all her strength. The waifu finally finishes praying and is ready to destroy the barriers of Europa. Although at first it seemed that she would not succeed, the prayers of all the believers strengthen her, and the waifu completely destroys the beast barrier. Thanks to this, Diablo literally destroys the monster with a single attack, as it is extremely weak without the barrier. At that moment, Gevalt appears and reveals that the waifu who sacrificed herself for Lumachina is still alive. Diablo again projects his image into the heavens to convince all believers and leaves the place before running out of mana. Lumachina is reunited with her friend Tria, and the next day, takes over as leader of the church. The waifu bids an emotional farewell to her friends, as she will stay at the cathedral to clean up all the corruption and regain the believers' trust. Diablo returns to Faltra as she recalls all that she has experienced with her new friends. She also fondly remembers Horn, who was left in charge of Alice to become stronger. Upon returning to the city, at the end, Shera confesses that the ring Diablo gave her as a gift is actually an engagement ring. Obviously, Rem also wants to marry Diablo, so the group decides to embark on a new mission to find another ring. The end! Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new anime recaps.